Hello and welcome to another Cliff Reviews Art House. This time I'm reviewing the film Dahomey, directed by Diop. This is an interesting mix of genres. It's closest to a documentary, but the way it's shot is pure poetry, beautiful filmmaking. And then she adds a narrative element, almost magical realism. The film documents the return of 26 looted artifacts from France to Benin, previously the kingdom of Dahomey. The documentary starts out with the packing of the artifacts for their journey. There's no commentary, and so on one level it's just filming the mundane, boring packing of the treasures. However, it's done in such a beautifully poetic way. She really has an eye to make the mundane aesthetically interesting. For me, this is what makes great art, having the eye to see poetry everywhere. Even the shot of an empty corridor with the buzzing of fluorescent lights. Some may think I'm mad, but I found this exhilarating. The documentary is only 68 minutes. In this way, it really differs from Frederick Wiseman's documentary about the National Gallery, which is made in a similar way, but is 3 or 4 hours long. Diop shows how this can be achieved in a much shorter time. Really great filmmaking, finding poetry in the mundane, hyper-awareness of the sounds. I love this way of making films, of making great poetry. We're given a few sentences of information about the process of returning the artifacts at the start of the film, but then there's just no narration at all. She gives us just enough information for us to totally tune in to what's going on. She does take it one step further at certain points where she gives a voice to one of the statues. The statue guides us on some of the interesting issues around the theft and the imprisonment. It suggests the idea of these not just being objects, not just being material heritage. It raises the idea of a spiritual link between the artifact and its homeland, what it calls immaterial heritage. This was used sparingly. It definitely wasn't overdone, but it did become a kind of narration, and I wasn't sure that it actually was required. I wouldn't say that it over-explains, but I think that there was something beautiful about no verbal explanation. I think that the statues already spoke for themselves. I'm not 100% sure of this. I think that there perhaps is some merit in guiding the viewer a little bit, and maybe it does make the film more accessible and more available to a wider audience. It definitely would be harder to read, and maybe I would have missed some of the points that the statue made. It's hard to know. I think personally I would have preferred the voice not to be added, but I still like the voice, if that makes sense. This is a deeply political film about colonialism and restitution, but for me I love when the poetry comes first and the politics is nuanced. This is what happens with this film, and it makes the politics much more powerful, much more subversive, I think. The final act of the film does get quite literal in presenting all the arguments around colonialism, restitution, history, heritage, culture, language and spirituality. But this is done using a very clever device of a debate between young people. It's great because it's a much more nuanced way of making all the many interesting points that would be too much to put into a narrative or on text on the screen, or even the statue telling us. I found it quite emotional how engaged and passionate these young people were about the issues. I think this is a quite brilliant way of having all the issues explicitly discussed without being too obvious or clunky. I saw this film a few days after the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting had agreed that the time has come for a meaningful dialogue on reparatory justice concerning slavery's legacy, despite the UK opposing these words. Many people dismiss these claims. For example, The Telegraph ran an article the other day saying that the Third World should be grateful for Britain's historical role. But a documentary like this leaves you with a clear picture of the long-term impact of colonialism. The film says that France has 7,000 artefacts and that only 26 are being returned. This seems incredible. The arrogance of the former colonial powers, the sense of entitlement. For me, the power of this film is that it clearly makes the case that we can no longer ignore these issues. Overall, I was so impressed with this film. Not only is it a beautiful work of art, a film with beautiful poetry, at the same time it's a devastating political analysis that at all times remains sufficiently nuanced, really powerful, really impressive documentary and artwork. I highly recommend it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.